Well, today I'm pleased to have Mike Graham. He is the founder of Real Carbon, a composite engineering company with a long history of high quality work. Through 35 years of industry experience, they help their clients design custom carbon fiber products. They have a proven track record when it comes to designing, developing, and manufacturing parts for a multitude of industries, including consumer, industrial, marine, medical, military, musical, recreational, and so many other industries. So I'm happy to have Mike on. Mike is originally from St. Andrews in Scotland. He moved over to the U.S. back in 1987. Mike is a chemist with an honors degree in chemistry from the University of London. So happy to have Mike, you joining me on the show to share about your company. Mike, welcome to the show today.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate the introduction. That was very complete, and I'm very much happy to be here to discuss Real Carbon and the burgeoning composites industry today. As you mentioned, I was born in St. Andrews in Scotland, it is pretty famous for golf, for the golfing members of the audience.
I've heard.
As well as the University of St. Andrews, which since I spent quite a bit of money there, I'm going to give them a free plug. They were founded on August the 28th, 1413, wow. That's the 15th century for anybody keeping score at home. So they've been going a wee while, as we like to say in Scotland. Though
that's older than our country.
And was born in St. Andrews. It is older than the United States, indeed. Yes, it's been going a while, and I was there during the 600-year anniversary, and fun events, and a lot of famous golfers came over there to pay tribute to the town and to the golf courses as well as the university. So it's got a lot of history and tradition, and anybody finding themselves in Scotland, I would strongly recommend that as a good place to visit, whether you're a golfer or not.
Absolutely.
So I was, educated in England at the University of London, got a chemistry degree, as you mentioned, and I was headhunted over to the United States to be an ink chemist way back in the day in 1987 as you mentioned, and came over to start in California and started living there and working there, and started windsurfing in the United States. I'd been windsurfing back in the UK, and that was a pretty big passion of mine back then, which features into the beginning of the company, Real Carbon, or Carbon Creations, as it was called back then.
Sure. I don't think being recruited as an ink chemist, I think that turned out well. I think you had another passion, right?
Well, I did. I was windsurfing a lot, and there was a friend of mine, as we'd say in the UK, a mate of mine, was really boring me with talking about this carbon fiber material and making airplane parts, C-17 parts out of it. And I thought, wow, we've got to make something more interesting than an airplane part. So we did a little bit of research, and we read up on carbon fiber pre-preg and how it would be a really great product for a board, or a surfboard, or a windsurfing board. But unfortunately, due to some technical hurdles, nobody had done it. So we decided, well, that sounds like a challenge. So we did. We manufactured a couple of prototypes in our garage, like any other business. We started there, and we built an oven and bought a couple of vacuum pumps, and we made a few boards in our garage, and then actually went fairly well. We were pretty pleased with the product, and so we formed the company, and that was in 1988. And our first products were windsurfing boards.
Back in 87, 88, carbon fiber, how big was that? I mean, was that pretty revolutionary at that time?
Yeah, not at all. Yeah, it was missionary. Back then, people would look at you, and think, well, what the heck? Why would I buy this? What's it good for?
Sure.
What is a carbon, and how do you make it into a fiber?
Right.
It was really early days. I mean, they had been making materials and making parts out of it in some exotic industries, much like the aerospace industry, obviously. But
of course,
the man on the street did not know. Graphite wasn't really much of a thing. You didn't see fishing poles or tennis rackets or a few tennis rackets and stuff like that. But the preponderance of the people that you met did not know what carbon fiber was. No.
What was the biggest barrier from your standpoint in introducing this to other industries? Was it a cost thing at the time, or was it just unheard of in terms of that for that application that they were looking at?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that basically nobody had really heard of carbon fiber, so a lot of what we did was early stage was education.
Sure.
Fortunately, I'm a bit pedantic and like to lecture people, so they got a free lecture about carbon fiber, and at the end of it, I would try and sell them a windsurfing board that we made in their garage.
Sure.
But yeah, a lot of it was really a lack of knowledge about what carbon fiber was and what its properties were and why it would be advantageous at all. And then, of course, as you just alluded to, the secondary issue was, well, then it has to be extremely expensive, right?
Sure.
And that is true. It was expensive back then. It still is moderately expensive, but we also had to educate people about the fact that what really made the parts expensive and exotic was that you weren't making very many of them, and that most of the processes were pretty immature back then.
Right. So tell us a little bit about your company. You guys are located out in Oregon, correct?
Yeah. We're in Hood River, Oregon, and to complete this, after we'd made the first couple of prototypes, I had a business partner at the time by the name of Wes Lapp. We decided that we would move up to the Gorge, Hood River, Oregon.
Sure.
Because that was the windsurfing capital of the United States at that point in time. And there was a pretty big windsurfing boom taking place in the late 1980s. And, it was hip and trendy and cool and fun and had a pretty good media image. And the Gorge was a very windy spot. And so people could drive there or fly there from all over the United States and sometimes the world and come there and go windsurfing. And so we thought, well, we got to do is wrestle a few of those folks into our factory and sell them aboard. So we moved up to the Gorge in 1991 and started making windsurfing boards out of carbon fiber prepreg.
Yeah, so it all started in that market with windsurfing, and then you've just spun out from there to look at other applications. I know you could probably share some of the, the projects that you've been involved with. I found it fascinating reading about the, the bagpipe project you were involved with, along with the golf bags as well. I mean, these are high-end golf bags.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, so we did. We had our start in windsurfing, and we originally made the boards, and we found that, the technical information that we'd read that indicated it was hard to make them using carbon fiber prepreg was entirely accurate. So we branched out to making the booms and partnered with a guy called Tom Hale and made the boom, which is the part you hold on to. And that was pretty successful. He decided to move into real estate. So we partnered with another company called Chinook Sailing Products, and they still make carbon fiber booms. But now we're kind of getting into the late 1990s, and we realized that what was going on around us was a little invisible, and that was that the windsurfing industry was dying. There was a new cool activity coming along, and people wanted to do different things. And so we discovered we had about 50% of the carbon fiber boom market, and there's not a lot of opportunity for growth there. Luckily and serendipitously, a lot of pretty technical folks had moved to this area, Hood River, to make various different windsurfing parts and to become what people call lifestyle entrepreneurs, which is people who want to live in a place where they can play, but also form a business and or get a job and work. And that's a pretty cool trick and accomplish it. So a couple of other guys moved to the Gorge and started making these unmanned aero vehicles. And this is now 1999. Nobody knew what an unmanned aero vehicle was in 99. But we had all these people making this lightweight carbon fiber stuff, which was also still fairly rare back then. And so there was a good combination of opportunity and technology in the Gorge, and a little bit of a UAV, unmanned aero vehicle, so-called drone cluster developed. Right. And so we started making those parts for the unmanned aero vehicle industry. A guy called Russ Hogue had started a company called Cloud Cap Technology, and he walked into our factory one day and said, "Hey, you guys know how to make carbon fiber stuff, right?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure." He said, "Okay, well, can you make an avionics enclosure for this thing for a Piccolo box?" And we said, "Sure." So we solved some of the technical problems, which was, how do you make a Faraday cage out of a composite part, stuff like that. And the rest, as they say, is history. As far as that industry is concerned, it kind of grew up and it got pretty big, and a few international events took place, and another company called In Situ kind of grew up on our doorstep as well, and they started growing pretty crazily, in the early 2000s. And so we started making a lot of products for those guys too. So suddenly we found ourselves manufacturing a lot of unmanned air vehicle parts, a lot of enclosures for a variety of different parts. And that's kind of been the main part of the business for the last 20 years or so, in an industry that, is still somewhat invisible. You still don't see a lot of drones or unmanned air vehicles, but people are pretty familiar with them from watching the news these days.
I know you all are involved in the design, engineering, prototyping. When you work with companies out there that are bringing, products to you, I mean, do you work with them from the initial design all the way through manufacturing, or do you start them off, help with the design and the engineering, the prototyping, and then hand this over to them, or a little bit of both?
Not so much of both, but more of the former. We manufacture a lot of different custom parts for a variety of different industries, as you mentioned earlier, the military, the music, of course, we'll talk about that later, but also, various industrial parts. So typically people will come to you with a pretty strong need, I need this. And it's been made in a variety of different materials in the past, a lot of metal, obviously. And they say, well, we've been making this part, using this part, but it's too bloody heavy. We want to take some weight out of it. Right. And so we will work with them on the designing of the part. And, the minimum amount of changes that we make are usually about 5%. And sometimes we start from the beginning and design the part from the ground up. But typically there's a part that forms the basis that you're going to end up manufacturing. And then you simply change the design. The technical term we use is called tweak. We tweak the design so that it meets the needs of the material, and also, of course, importantly, those of the customer. And so we do work with them quite a lot. We develop the first part of a process is usually a lot of exchange of CAD. We're a SolidWorks house these days, but we'll get CAD drawings, and we'll look at the drawings, and we'll do an evaluation, and then go from there and say, hey, this is what we think we should do, and can we do this, and can we do that? And so there's a bit of technical negotiation during that design process, and then we'll make the tool in house. The design and the tool and the materials and the fabrication methods go so closely hand in hand that you really need to do all of that. It's a pretty holistic process. I don't think a lot of people appreciate that, but all of the variables really work well together. So we typically make our own tools because we've got our own views on what those tools should be and how they should function.
How big's your team there?
We have 6 people right now.
Okay. I want you to share some of the custom products that you've worked on. I mentioned earlier the Pipe Makers Union, and then also some of the cool things. I love this, the case study with McDonald Leather Goods. Really, really nice golf bags. Yeah.
So I was approached about 15 or 16 years ago by a chap called Rob Gandara. And he is a very interesting character, highly educated. He's got a degree from MIT and a master's from Georgia Tech, and was working for a company that shall remain nameless, doing something that he didn't particularly enjoy. But on the side, he was playing the bagpipes and touring the world as a professional piper. So he approached the company and said, hey, are you interested in making any musical instruments? At the time, we were pretty, hot and heavy, making all the UAV parts that we discussed earlier. So we were like, yeah, maybe,
Sure.
See, but Rob's a pretty smart dude, as I mentioned earlier on. So he had done some research, and he said, what if I asked you to make some bagpipe parts? And I was like, he got me. So I was like, yeah, all right. So we started making bagpipe parts. Now we make about 30 different bagpipe parts. And along the way, he's encouraged us to make some flutes and whistles, which I think is what he really wanted all along. So we started making a lot of those parts. The bagpipe parts, of course, are near and dear to my heart. I'm not a piper myself. I'm very musically skilled, but they're a pretty significant value proposition making bagpipe parts. It sounds pretty obscure, but they're traditionally made of ironwood or other, hard, slow-growing woods, and they're hard to find, and it's not that friendly to chop down those trees in Africa. So making them out of carbon fiber is kind of a feel-good story, and they have some good properties. When you're playing the pipes, it's a pretty arduous task on your lungs. You're blowing into the instrument for several hours.
Sure.
Carbon fiber pipes make it a little bit easier on that process. And one of the big things in the bagpipe industry is if you ever go to a Highland Games, which of course as a Scotsman I would recommend you do, there's a lot of pomp and pageantry and history and tradition and a lot of tartan going on. You'll see that the pipers spend a lot of time at the beginning before their performance tuning their pipes with quite some pretty high-tech instruments. And that's because the old pipes were very hygroscopically sensitive. So if you went to Arizona and played the pipes one day, you had to tune them for that circumstance. And if you jumped on a plane and flew to Seattle and played them there, then you had to tune them all over again. So the carbon fiber bagpipes, they still need tuning, but that's a little easier. So there's some value propositions in the composite world that sometimes we don't appreciate. We typically think, it's light, stiff, and strong. But oftentimes you find there's other value propositions which are really what turns the customer on and provides the greatest contribution to your overall value proposition.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that is one application that I would have thought of. And I'd love to hear hear them play, but I just don't know a lot about them.
He also suckered us into making didgeridoo parts, which is an Aboriginal instrument, and which is even more obscure than making bagpipe parts. And we're not getting wealthy making didgeridoo parts, I can tell you that for sure. But anytime you get an opportunity to hear a didgeridoo, it's an Aboriginal instrument, as you may know, and they're typically long. And you always meet the musicians and they come with a long, sad story of how it used to be longer and grander and played a different note. So the same kind of pertains to what I said about the bagpipe parts. It's also pretty arduous to play those things. Mm-hmm. So we make a 2 and a 3 part carbon fiber didgeridoo. And I think we probably own the world's market on that, but I don't think it's a very large market, let's just put it that way. But somehow you find yourself along the way making carbon fiber didgeridoos, and
sure.
One is always tempted to ask, how did I get here? And the same is true of the golf bag. Obviously, I'm a very passionate golfer, having been born in St. Andrews and sent my daughter to the university there. And she's actually stayed in Scotland, so we still have strong roots there. But
sure.
We have a couple of golf customers, and that's very important and near and dear to my heart. And we make a very fine top ring for McDonald Leather Goods, who make a very lovely golf bag. And that's actually a pretty cool part. It divides the bag into the various different irons and the putter and your driver, which is useful. And we also make a part that keeps it up. Yeah. So it's always nice to innovate into an industry that you're interested in. And of course, I carry the bag and test the bag, and we've always found that to be beneficial, and that we know what the customer wants because we are one of the customers.
So these are designed more for the golfer he's walking, right? This isn't the guy. This is the guy that's walking the course.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that. And obviously, I play a lot of golf in Scotland. I'm a member of a few clubs there, including St. Andrews, and you do see that a lot. There's a lot of people who are interested in the tradition and the history of the game, and so the people who are buying these very fine bespoke leather bags are people who appreciate that. And so typically, they are carrying, and oftentimes they'll be carrying less than a full set. They make a lot of Sunday bags, and you'll be carrying maybe 7 or 8 clubs, 9 clubs, depending upon the golf course. So and there's a pretty strong value proposition, and as I said, it's an homage to the history of the game.
These are passion projects, I'm sure, for you. Do you find those more exciting? Are you as enthusiastic about those than you are with the some of the standard that we're most familiar with in the composite space, the military, the aerospace, the marine applications? Do you get excited more about these, or is it all the same?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think probably both, because, obviously I'm passionate about golf, and, I have the strong history with the bagpipes being Scottish, but I really enjoy solving problems. That sounds pretty trite, but, it really is interesting to me. And that's what keeps the job very compelling for me, is that I'm constantly solving these different problems for different markets. We're currently developing a pretty high-end marine product, and that comes with a whole unique set of challenges and problems and issues to be solved. And I think that's probably what interests me at the core of the business, is that, can we provide value by solving these problems in whether it be a military product or, some of the industrial products that we manufacturing, it solves problems that are not normally thought of, like, for instance, in the installation of some of these carbon fiber parts, are dramatically quicker and use a lot fewer staff and a lot more hand carrying, rather than carrying things with cranes and forklift trucks and things like that. So oftentimes you find that there's some hidden value, as I mentioned earlier, in these parts. And I think that's what turns me on, is being able to solve those problems and come up with innovative solutions. And that's what's kept us small and focused on that kind of business. We don't make 10,000 tubes a year, because there's people who make really lovely tubes. We make the more technically challenging parts and enjoy solving those problems.
So it keeps things fun, right? It's interesting. Every day is a new challenge, or you find new challenges along the way. And I think, like you said, you find the pleasure from solving problems. I think that's great. I think you have a fantastic job. You're creating solutions for very specific niche areas, and that's got to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it really is. And sometimes we're still asked to help push the technology forward. We're working currently with a a large battery manufacturer, and they pushed us pretty hard to make the lightest, stiffest part that's possible. And we had to do some finite element analysis and make some proof of concept parts and work on all that. And, just when you thought, well, we're already the lightest, stiffest, best game in town, somebody came along and said, well, can you get better? And we were pushed to do so. And that was challenging too. And I really enjoy that.
I want you to talk about one of the things that you all have started, which is upcycling carbon fiber prepreg table scraps. And you've made some proof of concept parts. We're going to be posting you sent me a great video. I was able to watch that, and we're going to be sharing that on our show page for this week. But if you would share a little bit about that with our audience.
Yeah, happy to. One of the things that we Scots are falsely accused of as being cheap. It's a very bad rumor that was started by the English, I think. But in all seriousness, one of our passions is not wasting anything.
Sure.
Waste not, want not.
Right.
And when I was a kid growing up in Scotland, everything was recycled. The newspapers were put in the shed, and the paper mill came and picked them up once a year and used them as secondary fiber. The food scraps were put out of the back door, and the pig farmer came at 2:30 in the morning, and he fed them to the pigs. And so, I grew up in this tradition of recycling and upcycling things, and all of the waste that wasn't consumed by the pigs was thrown on the garden, and we made a compost heap, and we used that to grow more vegetables, etc. So there's a strong tradition in my family and in the country of recycling and upcycling things, and it's been something that's near and dear to my heart for a number of years. So, we cut our material on an automated ply cutter. A lot of your listeners will be familiar with those, and no matter how carefully we nest them, we always end up with some scraps. And so we've been scratching ahead for a number of years as to how we can use those, and we've come up with some technology. And recycling carbon fiber prepreg is not very easy. The resin is a real nuisance. And so you have to really figure out how to cope with that. And there's a lot of different people using different techniques. And I've spoken to some people in the UK who are pyrolyzing the resin away, But we decided we really didn't want to go to that step. So we figured out how to make smaller parts as a proof of concept from that upcycled carbon fiber. And so far we've made some key rings and some name tags and a variety of other parts for some of our customers. And so we're very excited to do that because those parts are lovely and they're stiff and they're strong and they have a nice variable finish on them. And we're kind of deliberately manufacturing them to look like they're, something like travertine marble, which, people have that look so that it says this was an upcycled part. But it's been pretty successful so far. We worked on it for about a year. In the last 6 months, we started making some decent progress on how to use the material and manufacture the parts. And we've made a couple of videos to broadcast that. I would emphasize that those are just proof of concept, and
sure.
We think, Composites Weekly would probably have better data than I would in this respect, but my back of the envelope calculation says there's probably about 3 million kilograms of carbon fiber prepreg going into landfill on an annual basis, and it doesn't go anywhere very quickly. So we're happy to help start using that, and down the road we'd be happy to help other companies, recycle their waste too. So just to help make the planet a better place. And I know you've had a couple of people on recently, Ben, talking about plastics, and that's a great industry and it's a really feel-good story. And I think it's great for people to be working on those things and preventing that plastic going into the oceans. And so we thought, well, we could do our part and prevent carbon fiber prepreg going into the landfill. And what could we make out of this? And so far, it's the challenges have been there, but we've been able to make some really nice products.
Mike, I want our listeners to know, obviously, where they can learn more. You have your website. Our listeners can find that is realcarbon.com. Is that correct?
Correct.
Very good. Any other places? I know you guys are
on
LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. Yeah, I know you got some YouTube videos, and we'll be sharing those as well, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, we do indeed. Yeah, we're definitely on LinkedIn, slightly on Facebook, and then we've been uploading the videos onto YouTube at Real Carbon Inc., all one word, just to showcase what we can do with the upcycled material and help reduce landfill mass.
Fantastic. Mike, it's been a pleasure having you on. I look forward to getting this episode out. We'll be sharing it, and obviously we'll be publishing it, sharing it on our LinkedIn page, and certainly we'll connect with you to share it as well. And I think you guys are doing wonderful work, and hopefully our paths will cross. Will you be at the Sampi up in Seattle? I know that's up near your neck of the woods.
Yeah, I think we will. Yeah, it's been a while since anybody's gone to any trade shows, as you know. So it kind of caught us a little unawares. We're like, oh, Oh, that's right. Yeah, people do go to trade shows. So yeah, we're definitely looking to up our presence this year and see some folks.
That's right, Mike. Have a great weekend. Look forward to staying in touch with you. And thanks again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.